Okay, so our lesson today is going to be over multiplying decimals. So I'm going to write that as my title. And just like yesterday, so yesterday we talked about adding and subtracting decimals. So today we're going to be working with multiplying, so just a different operation. You're going to notice that the steps are different. So we're going to start with step 1. Step 1 is going to be to line up the last digit of each number. Line up the last digit of each number. Notice this is different from add and subtract. So add and subtract, it would say line up the decimal, but with multiplying decimals, it's definitely a little bit different. Step 2 is going to be to multiply like normal. So you just multiply like you normally do, still use the same algorithm, nothing changes in the multiplication part. And then step 3 is going to tell us what to do with the decimal. So we're going to count the digits behind the decimal So we're going to count up how many digits are behind the decimal in the problem. Then we're going to move the decimal the same amount in the product. Okay, so the most important words in this, we're going to count and then we're going to move. And we're going to do 4 examples. So in just a second, you should be able to see what that looks like. One thing I do want to talk about, a product, okay? Hopefully you remember this word. Product is just the answer to a multiplication problem. So that means we're going to count in the problem and move in the answer, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate my page into 4 sections. So I'm just going to draw kind of a big box with the rest of my page. Doesn't have to be perfect. The reason that I do this is so that I can keep my examples separate. I really like to stay organized. So I'm going to give you just a second to do that. Hopefully you are writing with me. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to this first box here because again, we're going to do 4 examples and I'm going to write it like normal first. So I'm just going to write 56 and 2/10 times 113. And you're going to notice we're not going to see an X to denote multiplication anymore, right? So an X is used in algebra, and in 7th grade, we're actually going to do some algebra type questions. So we don't use an X anymore because if we do, we're going to get it confused. So step number 1 says to line up the last digit. So the digit is just a number. So 2 is the last digit on this number. 3 is the last digit here. So if I'm lining up the last digit, it would look something like this, right? So notice this decimal is here. This decimal would be here, but it's a whole number, so it doesn't really have a decimal noted. Either way, we're not lining up these decimals. If we were, it would look like this. So this is how it's different from addition subtraction. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to multiply like normal. That's step 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 6 is 18. Carry your 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16. You're going to see me change colors quite a bit. Really, it's just to show you the different steps that I'm doing. So after I've multiplied by the ones place, which was my 3, I like to mark it out, and I'm going to put that 0 because now I'm moving to the tens place, right? 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 6 is 6, and 1 times 5 is 5. All right, we've got one more row of multiplication to do. At this point, I move into the hundredths place. So I have 2 placeholders because I'm going to the hundredths place, which is why I put my 2 zeros. This is probably the part that a lot of people would struggle with this multiplication problem. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 6 is 6, 1 times 5 is 5. Our multiplication algorithm, basically at this point, we add these numbers together. 6 plus 0 is 6. 8 plus 2 plus 0 is 10. 6 plus 6 is 12. 13, 14, 15. 6 plus 5 is 11. 12, 13. And then 5 plus 1 is 6. So our last step, if you look back up at step number 3, it says to count the digits behind the decimal and then move your decimal. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to count the digits behind the decimal in the problem. I can actually do that from the very top. I see 1 digit behind the decimal. So that means I'm going to move my decimal 1 space. So this would be 6,350 and 6 tenths. All right, let's go to our next example. Our next example is going to look a little bit more simple. So we're going to do 13 hundredths times 7 hundredths. Definitely more of a simple multiplication problem. So it says to line up the last digit of each number. So this is my last digit, and this is my last digit. 13 and 7 hundredths. All right, so let's do our multiplication. This one looks a lot more simple. 7 times 3 is 21. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9. And I'm done with that row. You probably can already tell what the next row is going to look like because, again, I'm going to move over. This is my placeholder. 0 times 3 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. Some of you might know that you don't need that row. Right now, it's okay if you still write it just because we are trying really hard to make sure we have the decimal in the correct spot. So let's add these together. 1 plus 0 is 1. 9 plus 0 is 9. And then this is really nothing, but we'll go ahead and bring that down. So here's one of the tricks, and I think the way that people get tricked a little bit on this question. So let's take a look at the decimal. It says to count the digits behind the decimal, then move. So a lot of people, they would just bring this decimal down and put it right here because that's what we do with add and subtract, right? That's not correct. If we're counting the digits, there's 1, there's 2, we're counting the digits in the whole problem, not just one of the numbers. So yeah, we've got 2 here, but we have 2 more here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 whole digits in this problem, right? So that means we start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we know where we need to hold a place. We use a 0 for a placeholder. All right, example number 3. This one is going to be 54 times 33 hundredths. So let's give this a context, okay? Let's say that your math teacher is buying 54 journals because maybe some kiddos don't have one or they need some extras or there's a project that they're doing. They're going to buy 54 journals and they're 33 cents each. So we're going to figure out how much money that your teacher is going to spend. So again, the first step is to line up the last digit of each number, right? So this is the last digit of this number. This is the last digit of this number. So it would look like this, okay? let's go ahead and do some multiplication. We multiply like normal, that's step 2. Okay, so 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16. I'm gonna go ahead and move over. Remember, if you're having trouble with the multiplication, not with the decimal, but with the actual multiplication process, that's okay. We're gonna practice that all year, so don't worry, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and put a 0 here. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16, okay? Notice those 2 rows look very similar because we were multiplying by 3 both of those times, right? Okay, so let's go ahead. 2 plus 0 is 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. 1 plus 6 is 7. And 1 plus nothing is 1. Last thing is to count the digits behind the decimal. And we can do that from the very beginning, then to move. So 54 is a whole number. The decimal would be right here, right? So it doesn't have anything behind the decimal. This has 2 digits behind the decimal, so that we're gonna go ahead and move 2 digits. Perfect. Okay, very last multiplication problem, 18.9 times 76. Again, still in parentheses, still next to each other. That means multiplication, especially as we're operating in 7th grade. So 18.9 and 76 hundredths. Notice these decimals are definitely not lined up. That is okay. We're not worried about that. That's really how it should look. It's going to be easier for us to operate that way. Okay, so let's do some multiplication. 6 times 9 is 54. 6 times 8 is 48. Plus 5 is 63. 6 times 1, I'm sorry, that's 53. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 5 is 11. See, even math teachers make a mistake. Multiplying too fast in my head. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is there's a 0 there because we're moving to the tens place, So 7 times 9 is 63. 7 times 8 is 56, plus another 6. So 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 6 is 13. Notice this one got a little bit bigger with our multiplication, a little bit larger numbers, which is why we're operating a little bit more on our multiplication facts, hopefully. If you don't know them, hopefully by the end of 7th grade, we might have them memorized. So let's add. 4 plus 0 is 4. 3 plus 3 is 6. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. And 1 plus nothing is 1. So let's talk through how many times we're gonna move this decimal. So again, we're gonna count the digits behind the decimal, then move the decimal. There's 1, 2, 3. So we're gonna move this decimal 1, 2, 3 times, and then we're done. So just to recap what we talked about today with multiplying decimals. Step 1, line up the last digit of each number. Step 2, multiply like normal. Step 3, count the digits behind the decimal, then move the decimal in the answer.